I gotta talk about erosion, but I also first just gotta tell you that I'm exhausted. Funny misunderstanding, if you'll forgive me a little social commentary. If you're in a hurry, just skip a minute or something. But my social commentary is that most people think that teaching from home is easier because most people think being around kids is difficult. So they're like, ha, teachers get to stay at home and avoid these horrible kids, and that must be so easy. But for me, being around kids was never the hard part. The hard part was figuring out how to help kids learn really complicated science and trying to figure out how to teach really complicated science while sitting in my shed at like midnight talking to a computer after a long day of arguing with administration and district officials. That's difficult. Being around kids is easy. That's the good part of my job. But this whole remote learning thing has been horribly difficult. And who knows? Maybe when we go back to school, it'll get easier. But I got a feeling that it's going to get even more complicated for the teachers to try to help students learn. I just had to vent. I got nobody to tell that to, so I'm telling it to the screen by myself at night. Sorry that you had to see that. Okay, that was my 1 minute comment. I hope that's okay. We got to talk about erosion, which is when dirt goes away, the accelerated removal of topsoil. Erosion can be natural because rain washes away topsoil, wind carries away topsoil, but human activities can also accelerate the speed with which topsoil goes away. That's called our man-made anthropogenic erosion, the stuff that we're responsible for. Now, everywhere in the world, we've been trying to figure out how to make more food for people, a lot of mouths to feed. And one of the easiest and simplest ways to make stuff grow faster is to break up soil, make it fluffier. You stir it all up. That's called tillage. I should have underlined this. That's a vocab term. Tillage is when you mix the soil. So you've probably seen tractors driving, pulling all these discs that are cutting the dirt, and they're at an angle. So when the dirt kicks up, it kind of just rolls together like inside of a blender. When you grind up the dirt, it mixes all the ingredients. So some of this dirt goes down there and some of that dirt comes up here. Any accumulated organics get blended together. And more importantly, now that the dirt is soft and fluffy, the roots can go deeper more easily and more quickly. So when you add nutrients to that soil, the roots are all over the soil and they can soak up those nutrients. It also minimizes weeds because as a weed sprouts, you till it and then you don't have as many weeds. And people love tillage. Most farmers do this. And all over the world, by making topsoil crumbly and fluffy and light and thin, it's become very easy for topsoil to go away, to get lost. Humans accelerate erosion through farming, especially tillage. Now, we call this the twofold problem because when you lose soil at the farm, that sucks. And then all of that soil has to go somewhere, so it's a lost resource uphill and a pollution problem downhill. You've got two problems: soil loss, sediment pollution, and water. Twofold problem. Now, our country is famous because we did this better than anybody else. Back in the 1930s, we figured out machinery and we intensified agriculture. We had built all these really interesting machines of war during World War I, and we had all these factories, so they just went from building machines of war to building machines of industry. And so it was so cheap. Farmers were like, wait, I can get a tractor for less than it cost me to keep horses. So everybody switched, and we all went from horses that are pretty crappy at tillage to machines that could till the entire farm in a few hours. Farmer saved a bunch of time, saved a bunch of money, and then figured out, well, I'll just till again tomorrow. And we were just tilling like crazy. And the entire US prairie was getting softer and softer and softer. And that was good for agriculture. That was easy. But it also happened to be a drought. We didn't have native grasses that could grow during a drought. So for many parts of the prairie, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of nothing growing in light, fluffy soil. And every time it would rain, the dirt would wash away. And every time it would get windy, the dirt would blow away. And it was called the Dust Bowl because the middle of the United States was like a big bowl of dust. And the wind would wash away all the dirt, and the water, that would blow away all the dirt. And somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, there's like a layer of sediment 2 feet deep that used to be the richest topsoil on the planet. Tremendous tragedy. The worst erosion ever was the Dust Bowl, followed by Australia, who grazed very aggressively. They tried growing non-native grasses. In a drought, they all died and there weren't any native grasses left. So during a drought, Australia had its own Dust Bowl, almost as bad as the American Dust Bowl. One was a long time ago, 1920s. Another one was pretty recent, like 70s, 80s. From this experience, we've learned a lot. You don't need to suffer erosion. I've made a list, and you'll have to define all of these. So here's a bunch of ways to solve erosion. The College Board will always ask you blah, blah, blah problem, and then D will be how do you solve that problem? Like how do you explain erosion, what causes erosion, give an example of a country that's had erosion, and then how can farmers avoid erosion, give 3 ways or something like that. So let's talk about how to avoid erosion. First of all, you can cover up the dirt. Like if you put wood chips or straw or something on top of the dirt, then that's going to protect it from the wind and the rain. That's called mulch. You can plant in blocks or in strips. That's called strip cropping or block cropping. And the idea is when you harvest the strawberries, the dirt's protected because there's corn on both sides. And when you go to knock down the corn, that dirt is protected because there's strawberries on both sides. So you block the wind by planting in strips or in alleys. Some people call that alley cropping, like an alley, like through the block, like a street that goes through the block. So in the block of plants, you would have an alley of another plant, alley cropping. You can do what's called low-till agriculture or no-till agriculture. This is very successful, but it takes a lot of skill. And sometimes it takes a little bit more time. So if labor cost is expensive, it can be difficult. But in no-till or low-till agriculture, you have very little or no mechanical tillage. You let the soil harden and become a crust. So that protects it from the wind and the rain. And then when you need to plant seeds, you have to make a little hole for every seed instead of just pushing them into fluffy dust. Or you have to cut out the weeds more often. It takes more weeding. But it turns out that minimizing the amount of tillage is extremely successful. You just got to learn new skills. It's a big paradigm shift for farmers. Another option is to grow plants that you're not going to harvest. You just grow the plants and then mix them into the dirt. that's called green manure or cover cropping. It's stuff that you build just to put it in the dirt. So you have more and more dirt because it's like you're adding compost. You like grow something and then it's compost. And finally, instead of planting up and down a hill, which can make gutters for the dirt to wash away, you can also plant in contours. So if you look at it from above, it would look like a bullseye, right? So like you like drive around the mountain and then you drive around the mountain and then you drive around the mountain and then you drive around the mountain. So from above, it looks like a bunch of rings. That's called contour plowing. And the idea is, instead of building gutters that go up and down the mountain, you would make level gutters so water cannot accelerate and take away the dirt. Globally, we're running out of dirt faster than dirt is made in nature. So if things keep going like they've been going, we'll have about 10% reduction in global food production by the end of next decade. Pretty tragic. One of the largest challenges to the global food supply is that we can't figure out how to keep the dirt on the farm. Because every farmer, if you just leave them be, is like, well, I know how to mix up dirt. We've had generations of farming that was based on tillage. And there's like a shift globally to train farmers to switch gears. Now, let me show you a fascinating map. Take a minute to soak this in. This has relevant information for you. First of all, the color coding gives you like a status report on soil. Almost nowhere on the planet is dirt good. Almost everywhere on the planet, it's either fair, poor, or very poor. This is the worst soil condition on the planet, and that downward arrow means it's getting worse. If you look at the places with growing populations, in order to intensify food production, all of those, right, the Southern Hemisphere nations, they're all poor soil volume and getting worse, arrows pointing down. What's interesting is the countries that were the heart of the global food supply a couple generations ago, they already made these mistakes. So North America, Europe, and Australia, they've already like hit rock bottom. It's like an old rock star, like they've already had all the bad habits and now they do sit-ups and drink water, right? Like all these countries, they're like Mick Jagger. Like, dude, I've already messed around. Now I got to try to survive. So the places that have been growing food in industrial volumes the longest are in what we would call recovery. They have like decent topsoils, and their topsoil trends are improving. Go back if you need to and make sure that you understand how to avoid erosion. Make sure you write down the twofold thing and make sure you know what tillage is. That will be the end of the number 7 video.